What would you think if I told you that on your tombstone would be inscribed a 4-word epitaph? Well, you might respond, it would depend on who would write this epitaph, an enemy or a loved one. It might also depend, you might say, on how well this person knew and understood you. If a newspaper critic wrote on for concert pianist the 4 words, "He was a failure," you could always say that was his opinion. But if one of the world's great musicians wrote, "He was a genius," then you are apt to take the remark more seriously. There was a character in the gospel who Jesus once described with 4 immortal words. "Great is your faith." She was a Canaanite woman who came from the country to the north of Palestine, a country hostile to the Jews. She was presumably married. She had at least one child, but that's all we know about her. We don't know whether she was a good woman or a bad woman. We don't know her name. All we know of her is that in this single encounter with Jesus, he spoke to her this 4-word epitaph. "Great is your faith." Only 4 words, but they are enough to make her immortal. We can trust these words as being true because the expert on faith spoke them. Jesus searched for faith as a gem collector would search for fine jewels. He did not always find it in his disciples. On no occasion that we know did he ever say of Peter, James, and John, "Great is your faith." More often the words he spoke to them, "You of little faith." On only one other occasion did Jesus praise a person for their faith. Interestingly, that was a Roman soldier stationed in Capernaum. We regard this Canaanite woman with more than just an academic interest. She awakes in us a feeling of admiration, perhaps even envy, because she stands where most of us would like to stand. What faithful Christian would not like it said of him or her, "Great is your faith"? Think of what it would mean if an aspiring young artist had Picasso place his hand on his shoulder and say, "You have great talent." How wonderful it would be then to a believer in God if Jesus would place his hand on our shoulder and say, "You have a remarkable talent for faith." But how does one qualify for this praise? What does one have to do? To answer these questions, let us take a closer look at her story. Crossing barriers. First, we can say of this Canaanite woman that she was willing to cross barriers. Her faith consisted mainly in the fact that she turned to Jesus for help. That was quite remarkable. However, when you remember that she was a Gentile, a Canaanite, and therefore a traditional enemy of the Jews, they had been despised for centuries. Faith still consists of turning to Christ for help, and barriers today still must be crossed. There is a barrier of time, 2000 years to be precise. Jesus lived then and we live now. We think it's such a different ball game today. How can he possibly help me? There is the barrier of culture. A generation that travels faster than the speed of sound may well wonder how it can get help from a Palestine Jew who traveled on a donkey. Can Jesus even understand our problems? There is a barrier of pride. Am I willing to get beyond myself and admit that I cannot handle every situation that comes up in life? Are we able to cross the barrier that says, "I don't need you, Jesus. I am doing quite well by myself"? It seems clear that when this lady turned to Christ for help, she knew little of him. She first addressed him by simply saying, "Sir." Then, unsure if she had given the proper title, she added, "Son of David." Undoubtedly, she had heard of the great powers of Jesus, and she was willing to put down her pride and cry out for help. "Have pity on me." But that was her faith and the extent of her understanding of who Jesus was, and it was enough. refusing to be put off. Secondly, we can say of her that she refused to be put off. There were at least three intimidating factors that would have made her give up. First, there was the silence of Jesus. The scripture tells us that to her cry of help and outstretched hand, Jesus simply did not reply a word. How unlike of him, how uncharacteristic. There is no reaction harder to bear than silence. A flat no at least acknowledges your presence and tells you where you stand. But when there is silence, you don't know what the person is thinking or even if they have acknowledged you. There is no sterner test of faith than the silence of God. That's how the Canaanite woman must have felt. She told Jesus that her daughter was sick and needed help, and what she got in reply was silence. Surprisingly, this did not intimidate her. She perceived what very few people have the faith to perceive, that the silence of God does not mean the indifference of God. This woman did not lose heart in the face of silence. Another intimidating factor was that this woman received no help from the disciples. Indeed, they regarded her pleas for help as merely a nuisance. They urged Jesus, "Send her away, see how she comes shouting after us." They said the same thing when they saw 5,000 hungry people at the Sea of Galilee. They said the same thing when a poor crippled beggar cried out for help at the pool of Bethesda. Even when the children tried to see Jesus, they tried to send them away. The disciples, like the church today, had become fatigued under the constant pressure of the demands made upon them. Part of this woman's faith, however, was that she would not be put off by the indifference of people. Yet, the disciples did not seem to be the only ones putting this woman off. When Jesus finally did break his silence, he said to her, "I have been sent to the house of Israel and to them alone." Was Jesus testing her? We don't know. But it sounds very much as if he is saying, "Sorry, you are not a religious woman." But even then, she refused to be put off. In spite of what Jesus said, she fell at his feet and cried out, "Sir, help me." That was the essence of her faith. She may not have belonged to the synagogue. She may not have known the Torah, but she had need that was enough. Going in faith and humility. Which brings us to the third point of her faith. She realized that she had no claim on Jesus for the request that she was making. To this woman's plea for help, Jesus makes another statement that we have difficulty in understanding. It does not sound like something that he would say. He said to her, "It is not right to take children's bread and throw it to the dogs." That sounds like a contemptuous insult. Even today, the term dog is used for something particularly despicable. But she didn't cry and she didn't walk away. She answered Jesus by saying, "It is true, sir. I admit that I am a dog. I realize that I have no claim upon you." That was her faith. And that is still faith today. It is faith to go to God for help and at the same time admit that we have no claim upon Him. Having nothing that we have done to merit His mercy, in no position to make demands, we go to God in faith. The greatness of this woman's faith consists in, first, her willingness to cross the barrier of racism. Second, her refusal to be put off or ignored because of her position in life. And third, her humility in admitting that she did not deserve the Master's attention and time. Amen.